Hey everyone, it's Lisa Sweeney here from Business in Heels, and I'm so excited today. I'm being joined by Cath Nicholson from HR Central. So, welcome, Cath.
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here. It's very
I
exciting.
know it's exciting. We're going to talk about the times they are changing, and it is such a challenge, today with all things to do with HR. So, we're very excited to have you involved with us talking about this. So, tell us a little bit about yourself before we kick off.
Well, I'm the Chief Communications Officer at HR Central. I've been with HR Central since 2015 and watched a significant growth with the business. And I basically do engagement and client relationships and help people understand more about HR Central and what we do, what our offering is. And I really enjoy listening to people's stories about their business and what they're doing in their business, and really aim to help them understand HR legislation, which is pretty intense. And as I say, the times are changing. Well, they're going to continue to change. So it's a landscape that if you employ one person or 30 people, you still have to be across it, unfortunately. And it's a time-consuming area. So HR Central aim to sort of look after that aspect for you and give you back your time to focus on your core business growth. So that's what we do.
Yeah, and I love the fact that, people can sign up to you from anywhere in Australia.
Yep.
They've got support with real people, but then they've got access to a huge amount of resources and, library of
Absolutely.
stuff.
Absolutely. And a platform as well, which is essential for sort of record keeping and centralising that employee data. So you don't have to fossick around looking for paper copies of things or, trying to count everything, all those exchanges you have with your employees. It's all there on the system. So that's what we
Easy.
do.
Makes life easy. Now, let me
That's what we aim to do.
not hog up too much space. So I'm going to
Okay.
add up your slides and it's
Thank you.
over to you.
Thank you. Well, yes. So thanks, everyone. As I said, I'm really excited to be part of the Business in Heels network, and HR Central. Really looking forward to a long association with you all. So it's very exciting. So just going to click on to the next slide. What we're going to cover today. We'll have a quick debrief on the key HR obligations for anyone that has employees. As I mentioned before, that is from the first employee, the first person you employ, to up to 100, 200, however you have, your obligations are the same. We'll then look at some of the key changes that have come in place since December 2022, which has seen the biggest reform in the HR space since 2009 with the introduction of the Fair Work Act, and also how to stay informed the right way to make it easier for you. It is a bit of a hard landscape to navigate, and we want to make it sort of easy for you to do that and manage that within your business. So we did touch on it, but who are HR Central? HR Central are an owned and operated business that provides HR services for all industries throughout Australia, as Lisa mentioned. We've been in existence since 2015. We've seen some rapid growth in our own business and seen some fabulous sort of successes for the businesses that we support. So it's been really, really good to see. I'll tell you a little story. Prior to HR Central, we had another business that was an IT business, and we had a HR issue whereby an employee wanted to take us to Fair Work because we made them redundant. And that was a nightmare. We had no idea. All our paperwork was in a million places. A lot of our communication was via email or conversation, so it was all scattered everywhere. So in other words, our record keeping was a bit loose. We knew someone who worked in industrial relations for McDonald's and sought his counsel. And what he did was he laid out a sort of a step-by-step process for us that helped us retrieve our information and get a process in place, and luckily we came out clear. We had actually done the right thing by that person, but at that time we were not sure and we were quite anxious about it. Now, whilst that doesn't always happen, unfortunately, sometimes things do escalate. It did teach us a huge lesson, and one was that we needed all our HR documents and communications in one central location, and be across all our obligations as an employer. And so what we did in that business was we built the HR Central platform to host and store all our documentation, which was really fantastic. And to cut a long story short, we took it to market. The other business we sold, and because back in 2015 there wasn't actually much around for a small business or even a medium business with HR support outsourcing. And a lot of people that start business, they don't necessarily know about all the legislation, all the obligations they have as an employer. So what we've tried to do in our journey since 2015 is to educate people and support people with their compliance in the HR landscape. So let's have a quick rundown of the basics that you need to be aware of. You need to adhere to the Fair Work Act, which is inclusive of the National Employment Standards, which I'll touch on briefly, employment under awards or not, and have safe working conditions for your employees, which is both physical and mental. So, sorry, I've just skipped a slide. I'll go back there. So basically, let's start with the Fair Work Act. So the Fair Work Act actually sort of sets out guidelines around terms and conditions of employment, rights and responsibilities of employees, employers and obligations in relation to that employment, compliance with and enforcement of the Act, and provision for the administration of the Act, establishing the Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman. On top of these provisions and guidelines, the Act also employs a guaranteed safety net of fair, relevant and enforceable minimum terms and conditions that's done through the National Employment Standards, the NES, modern awards and the National Minimum Wage. So the NES includes things like maximum weekly hours of work, the right to request flexible working arrangements, all leave types, so parental leave, compassionate leave, annual leave, domestic and violence leave. It addresses public holidays and terms and payments around those, and notices of termination and redundancy pays, as well as a Fair Work information statement that you must provide to every employee when they commence working with you. So whilst the National Employment Standards provide a base level of provisions that are applicable to all employees in the National Workplace System, most minimum entitlements for wages and employment conditions are found under the modern awards, which is 122 of them. So they're things that you need to be mindful of when you employ. And in addition to that, you also need to be able to determine your employees correctly. So, for example, is it an employee or is it a contractor? Is it a casual employee or is it a permanent part-time employee? And those things are really, really important. So that needs to be obviously determined from the start when you employ someone. And you need to provide a physical and mentally safe environment, work environment, which is inclusive of an environment that's free of discrimination and harassment and bullying. So how do we do this? Well, we do this with things through agreements, contracts with people at the start of their employment, policies and procedures that lay out clear expectations of the business and what the business expectations are of that person. Good record keeping everything centralised, making sure that every sort of conversation you have with employees or any sort of exchanges, any performance management, etc., are recorded. That there's also the requirement that you provide pay slips, that you monitor leave, and that you perhaps have things like an EAP, which is an employee assistance program, which offers employees the opportunity to seek external psychological support confidentially to make sure that they have somewhere to go where they feel that they're supported. It doesn't necessarily have to be a work issue that they're talking about. It could be some personal situations, but that they've got an area to go to that they feel that they can seek some counsel outside of the workplace. And of course, good communication with your team. That's absolutely paramount. These days, it's all about how people talk to their team, respect what they say, and consider everyone an equal regardless of race, gender, culture, etc. So Whilst all of the above should not be intimidating, really, it can be. So that's why we sort of advise people to seek the counsel of an HR expert to make sure that they've got all that through, and that you don't have to go yourself to the Fair Work website and wade through, reams and reams of information. If you've got someone who's an HR resource, they can help you through all that and manage that. So the key here is also that legislation changes all the time. So you've got to be really up to date with what happens. So where my sort of communication to you today is about when the Albanese government was in pre-election, they had key promises around addressing the gender pay gap, and also to look at the more vulnerable in the workforce, those employees that tended to be overworked and possibly underpaid, or that had certain situations in their personal life that could impact their working life. So as a result, the Secure Jobs Better Pays Act was passed, and it came to force in December 22, and it was the biggest shake-up since 2009 when the Fair Work Act was introduced. So we're going to look at some of those changes. So, pay secrecies. Once upon a time, you were able to put a disclosure in a contract or in a policy to say that someone couldn't ask another or disclose what they were being paid. So this has been overruled, and as a result now, any employee, whether they be someone that's been in the business, has already exited from the business, or is in the recruitment process, they have the opportunity to ask another what they're being paid. Now, the person they're asking doesn't have to disclose that. That's no obligation on their behalf to say, but the person asking is not going to face any adverse action as a result. So once upon a time they could be, but now they can't be. So this then flows on to contracts, because in a contract, often there will be a non-pay disclosure clause, and they can no longer exist. So you have to make sure any contracts going forward don't have that in it, so that you've got that fairness for people to be open about what they're getting paid. And this is once again that opening up about making sure that people are paid fairly. Two people doing the same job, maybe one, regardless of experience, should be able to know what the other person is being paid, should they want to know. So that's pay secrecy. Sexual harassment. So in the past, it was very difficult for people who were sexually harassed in the workplace to actually go somewhere that was, if they made a complaint to work, outside of their employer. And some employers were fantastic about it, and some just disregarded it and shut it down. They didn't want to know about it. So with Fair Work, you can take an unfair dismissal to Fair Work, and they have an area where that is dealt with. But now they've introduced a specific area as well around sexual harassment. So if someone has a complaint, they can actually go somewhere to raise that. And that's not just for a woman, it's for any sexual harassment of any person in that place. So what's the flow on from that? Well, the flow on from that is that businesses now need to be very proactive about mitigating the risks of sexual harassment happening in their workplace. So it just can't be that it happens that a business reacts if someone comes to them and says, I've been sexually harassed. Yes, how they react is very important, but it's about proactively educating people that sexual harassment in your workplace is just not tolerated. And it's something about that too. It's not just the physical, it's also online. So what I mean by that is there's some examples, so obviously the physical, touching people inappropriate, making sexually lewd comments, or talking about people in a demeaning manner due to their sexuality. But it could be also someone watching something like porn on a computer where others can see it, or someone else might have to use that computer and be subject to that. So it's about safety. This is now sort of almost an OH&S, part of OH&S or WH&S, where people can feel that they can come to work and be in a safe environment, free of any of that harassment. So in the past, you had some policies that would say that we don't tolerate sexual harassment in our workplace. And whilst these are still in existence and they're really good, and it's a really good idea to have not just a policy, but a policy that employees read and agree to and they sign off on, so that they're also held accountable because they've agreed to that not do that behaviour in the workplace. But it's also getting a bit more than that. It's about things like training, right? You can have online training or have a qualified trainer come to the workplace to discuss the do's and don'ts around that, and educating people about what that means, examples of what sexual harassment could be. And then doing things like reminder emails and reissuing policies around the topics to reinforce your messaging. And the other thing is that it also applies to stakeholders in your business. So this could be suppliers, it could be patrons, it could be anyone that comes in contact with your team. And things like that you can do, for example, if it was a supplier who sexually harassed one of your team, then you need to sort of demonstrate that you're proactive in supporting that employee. So things like cutting off that supplier, saying we don't work with that person anymore because that person brings a bad energy into our workplace and we don't stand for it. So it's about showing your employee that you've got their back and that you're stamping out that behaviour. The key here is to address the issue early and to talk it through with your employee, and to make sure that your employee feels that that they are respected, and that if something happens, this is the process, this is what we do, this is how we're looking after you, this is how we'll protect you, and we're making sure this doesn't happen again. So that's sort of something that's really, really important. So that's sexual harassment. So flexibility with working arrangements. So with the Secure Jobs Better Pays Act, they stipulated a group of people that flexible working arrangements would really benefit that person. So we're looking at people like that are parents, over 55s, carers, pregnant people, people that experience family and domestic violence, and casual employees. So the concept of leave or buying leave or changing work hours, once upon a time, a business could say no. But now employees are obligated to legally make life more flexible for the people that in those groups that are wanting to have that sort of flexible work arrangement for whatever reason they might want to have. So, for example, there is a process in place now. So it's a prescribed method. So the employee has the legal right to apply in writing for some flexible working arrangements. And as the employer, you must reply in 21 days in writing upon receipt of that request. And you have to make a genuine effort to try and accommodate what the employers ask for. So, for example, if someone says, I want to work 4 days a week or work from home, you have to make a genuine effort to solve that for them. And you have to consider the consequences of refusing the right for that employee. So, for example, if they have to look after a child or a sick person at home, you basically have to do what you can to support them. So, because if you don't, what are the consequences for the employee, right? They might have to leave their job, right? So we're circling back to the act about secure jobs. We want people to have employment, and we want to work as an employer to make sure that it works best for them, but it also has to work for you as well. So, you are able to say, look, we're only a four people business, and we can't afford to have someone away for a day. But we can look at other options. We can look at other ways to support you. So I can't give you a full day off, but I can give you half a day, or I can give you every second Friday. And, that may or may not suit the employee, but you need to be showing that you're trying to do something. And then if you can't come to a resolve, you need to sort of let the employee know that you're trying really hard, but you can't actually accommodate that for whatever reason. And then you have to sort of prove that you've done everything you can. But if you can't, then the employee can refer the dispute to Fair Work, and see if they can take it from there. But then if you can accommodate it, that's great, and it works well for both people. And there's been lots of studies on the fact that when people do have flexible working arrangements, that takes the pressure off them for their home situation, and also they can still have a productive and really engaged sort of employment with your business. So, wage increases. So these are pretty standard. They come out yearly. A good way to stay informed is to actually probably look at businesses like HR Central that we provide these updates when they come out, and what the increase is, what the percentage is, etc., and who it applies to and what you have to do. So with the wage increase, every year there is a percentage increase. And you have to make sure that employee is actually meeting that increase, and that they're on what the minimum wage sets out. So they might say it's a 1.5% increase, which means that the minimum wage sits at, say, $27.50 or whatever. But one thing I'll add here is the legal requirements versus employee relations. So say, for example, and this is just a made-up example, but say the increase under an award is 1.75%. So that entitles the employee to $30 an hour, for example. But you're already paying that employee $35 an hour. So they're still sitting above that increase. So in those instances, you don't actually have to increase their wage because they're already sitting above. So legally, you have to make sure they hit that mark where the increase is, but you don't have to go above and beyond and put an extra 1.75% on their wage if they're already above. If that makes sense. Which, you've sort of got some leeway here as a business owner, and you have to, as much as we always want to try and do it the right thing by employees, you've got a business to run as well. And there's times when, people get a bit shaken up about, I've got to increase, I haven't got the money, but if you're already paying people above, then you don't need to. So, but you need to check. You really need to check. So we'll move on to family and domestic violence leave. So now every employee is entitled to 10 days family and domestic violence leave. Now, this applies to every employee. So it's permanent, part-time, casuals. They all get 10 days. And these do not accrue. They reset at their anniversary, but everyone gets 10 days available to them. So it doesn't matter what employee type you are. So, and that leave is to cover everything around people having to find a new place to live, people going to psychologist or doctor's appointments, people, just anything to do around moving out of that situation or supporting that situation is what they are entitled to under the family and domestic violence leave. So that's something that has to be done. And the key thing here, though, is that you can't put it on payslips. So because you need to protect that person if anyone else sees their payslip that could be potentially endangering that employee. So what you need to do is come up with another form, because you still need to calculate it in the back end through your Xero or MYOB, etc. So you just need to come up with another leave type and be able to notate that and keep record of it in the back end, but maybe reflect it on a payslip as leave other or time in lieu or whatever it is that you want to acknowledge it at. But it's really important that you don't put it on the payslip to protect the employee that's applied for that leave. So now, fixed term contracts. Can't be any more than 2 years now. So once upon a time, people could have contracts that rolled on forever and ever and ever. But now you can only offer a 2-year contract or 2 one-year contracts. And then after that is the expectation that that employee will be given a permanent position in your business. Now, obviously, some of the sort of rules around that is if that employee isn't working out, you still have to go through the correct performance management process and work with them, and you can exit them within that contract period if it's not working out and you've got that evidence-based and performance managed process in place that has indicated that that employee isn't working out, they're not executing their tasks and duties properly, or they might be a bad culture fit. But you can't roll on these contracts. You need to have the 2 years and then look at alternative employment. Because also, if that employee has been a good employee for 2 years, then their expectation is that they would continue in the business. And once again, it's circling back to the secure jobs and making sure that people have employment ongoing. So they're sort of the key changes that have happened. Sorry, I've just skipped a slide. Around since 2022. There'll be more coming up. There's always things that change in the legislation. But they're things that, even though they came in 2022, some people still haven't really implemented correctly in their business, and you really need to do that. So don't ignore it and don't wing it. I always say with HR, you know, all of us have sometimes sort of had a spot on our leg or a pain in our stomach or a headache or whatever, and we've Googled it and we've, you know, diagnosed ourselves with cancer, or, you know, we have to have a leg removed or whatever. And then it's gone on, and you've gone to the doctor, the specialist, and the doctor has said, nah, that's just nothing, don't worry about that, or here are some tablets, you've actually got an ulcer. And so it's that sort of interpreting something when you're not trained in that field and coming to your own conclusion. So this is where you ring an HR specialist, and you need that person who's fully qualified in that area. So there you are, Lisa. And, you know, also with seeking HR support, it gives you back, as I said earlier, your time, right? And for you to do what you do best. And it gives you that sort of peace of mind as well, that someone is advising you correctly and appropriately, and that you don't have to have a guess at it and think you're doing the right thing, but maybe inadvertently you're not. So
I think that's really, really well put, Cath. It's so many complex changes, really, when you think about it. You know, it's a minefield.
It is. And the thing is that, you know, most people do the right thing by their employees, absolutely. But sometimes, as I said earlier, you can inadvertently not do the right thing. And that can, I mean, not always saying that it's going to go to Fair Work or, you know, it's going to be a huge issue, but it can cause a disgruntlement in the workplace. That can then feed on to the culture and the positivity of your workforce. So it's really important that you sort of get onto it, you communicate with your team, you make sure that they're aware of all the processes I said before around that sexual harassment, what you're doing as a business to support them, offering an EAP, and having a voice, giving them a voice, listening to them, and having that clear communication.
I think it's really important, as you said, good communication is really invaluable, and just being human, I think, and listening to people, some great messages in what you're sharing there.
Yeah. And, it's a sort of an interesting space to the workforce, because we've got young people coming in, and they come in with a completely different attitude and a way of operating. And we've still got older people in the workplace that have also a different attitude and a way of working. And it's about marrying those people all together and making sure that everyone respects each other as a team, and that everyone can learn from each other from different things. I mean, I personally love working with some of the young people in our business, because they teach me so much. I mean, aside from helping me with my computer, they teach me lots of stuff, and it's a really interesting area, because they're very open. When I started work back in the dark ages, I didn't speak. I just did everything my boss said, and that was from picking up his dry cleaning, I remember, to buying him lunch and all sorts of things. And now it's sort of a little bit of a different working, a mixture of working. And I think it's really good too, opening up that aspect of, really respecting people from their gender and their culture and how they identify, and etc., because that actually makes the workplace richer. It's good.
From a lot of the work that we've done with the Gender Equity Awards, and hearing it, the social contract as a team, getting together and agreeing what are the goes and what are the no-goes. And just because I might be of a certain nationality, the assumption that I like certain things, is not right. And so people, need to stop assuming and actually ask. And it's great, because once those norms are established, then it's up to everyone to manage to them, rather than just, letting people try and guess. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it does. I mean, we're a hugely multicultural society. So, and, we've benefited so much from that, and yeah, it makes it interesting, and it's great. And people have different skill sets, and so you really need to see what that person brings and embrace it.
And the business case for diversity is very clear.
Yeah.
The more diverse your company is, the closer it is to your consumer base, and often the better the profit. So, there's no debate about it.
Oh, absolutely. And and there's also this, when you recruit, there tends to be a sort of a default that people go to, where they like people that are like them. So you just naturally say, oh, they'll be a great fit because they're just like me, or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily work, because you just don't want everyone to be the same. You sort of have to open your mind a bit and sort of think what that person can bring, and can bring something different to what other employees have. And that's really important, because there's gaps in businesses that need to be filled, and they can be done by people that have different experience, different backgrounds, skill sets, etc.
So for any of you listening or watching the recording of this, if you've got any concerns, feel that maybe you are in breach, or actually just want to have a chat to someone, we'll have Cath's email on here. So feel free to reach out to Cath and anyone at the HR Central team, and they can certainly answer your questions and give you some good guidance. Some of this stuff that we're talking about, of course, intersectionality and all the new things that are coming, workplaces are still working on what good looks like here. But the team obviously have a huge wealth of knowledge, and will be able to help you navigate some of these tricky little things, particularly once you get into the 3-letter acronyms of all the HR speak. So thanks so much, Cath, for joining us and
Oh, it's a
sharing
pleasure.
with us, you know, some of the overviews of this. It's really beneficial. And we will be sharing all this out with our audience through EDM. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Lisa, and it's really good to be here. So thank you. We'll see you.